Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, listeners, to the Double Shot podcast with your favourite cousins, James and Alex Fitzgerald. Although Alex has been substituted this week by a good friend of the show who has filled in on many occasions, currently holds the highest and most listened to episode on the Double Shot. Welcome, Mitch.
Perfect. I'll keep my hand up for that one. I'll be... That's on the mantelpiece, but pleasure to be here as always. I'm just waiting for one day that Alex goes away and I don't get the tap on the shoulder. Someone else gets the call up, I'll be devastated. But no, I'll enjoy it while I'm here, James.
Very good to have you. Tell you what is going to be tough is... yes, the day that you don't get the tap on the shoulder, but for us Queenslanders, it's going to be tough to come in on a Monday next week.
Mate, I was thinking, I think I've got, most people get 4 weeks of annual leave a year. I might just take...
Yeah, and we say most people because that doesn't apply to the other co-hosts.
I was just
of this
about
show.
to say...
Alex taking leave Fitzgerald.
I've enjoyed having it the last 2 Januaries, but I reckon that's going to be a different story come January 2023. But no, what I was going to say is I might just take every Monday off until my annual leave runs out.
Yeah, it is addictive. It is addictive. And you spent the weekend down in Iluka.
I did.
Fill us in. Where's Iluka?
Iluka's 2 hours south of the Gold Coast. People will probably know Yamba, which is a popular tourist destination, sleepy, surfy town. Iluka's about 30 minutes north of Yamba. Yeah, spent the weekend down there. Plenty of surf, plenty of sun. And how about yourself? I see that I'm not sure whether it was an excuse to get a shot of the rig out there or you were genuinely happy that you had a new pool, but I saw shirt off pool happening. How was it? How was the first dip?
Well, let me tell you, of all the weeks to be stuck at home on the long weekend because my wife had COVID, still got COVID for one more day. There's new rules in Queensland where if you test negative and you got no symptoms, you can get out and go to work. So I'm negative. Somehow I've survived the past 6 days whilst Han has got COVID. I've avoided it. But of all the weeks to have a brand new pool, not a bad week to be stuck at home. I literally just had to stay at home and use the new pool, clean it and get the yard ready. It was absolutely unreal. Very nice weather over this long weekend.
And have you got yourself a creepy crawler yet? Or are you just doing the hand washing stuff at the moment?
No, I got the creepy crawly.
Our man doesn't do hand washing, I don't reckon.
No, I'm using the brush. I'm doing a bit of manual labour, but no, I'm relying on technology for the most of it.
Very good.
And hey, let's get stuck in. We've got house prices to talk about. The Reserve Bank is doing their announcement today. Inflation's been everywhere, and we're going to talk about that in a fun sort of way. But I want to talk about, to start with, a Core Logic report. We have a saying here that we read them so you don't have to.
Yeah.
This one here is come from Alex. She's copy-pasted what seems to be 3 pages worth of the report.
Done the old screenshot, the graphs in there, which...
Screenshotted everything. Didn't have it in her to do a couple of paragraphs of summary. But tell us, what's this saying for us here?
Well, look, short and sweet, it's saying that we have the great resignation on our hands is what Michael Page is reporting there, in that he's saying that currently of the respondents surveyed in this report, 42% of them have only been in their job for less than 1 year. And that seems to be the trend globally across most sort of major, major nations. And then further to that, 67% of respondents had indicated that they were, wishing to resign or planned resignation, as he sets it out, in the next 6 months.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy. But James, have a guess at what you think some of the top industries are for people that work in that wishing to resign.
Oh, you hit me with the pop quiz earlier because this is interesting. Yeah. We talked about doing a pop quiz for each other. I've got one for you as well, so I'll keep that for a later segment. But okay, so I'm guessing what is it? The top industries where people have.
So the industries where people are most unhappy or wishing to resign.
Right. Okay, so if you're in the top industry, you're probably going to have not a lot of loyalty. So I've got to be careful what I say here. You've probably also got to have a low supply of people because you're likely getting offers for more money. I'm going to say multimedia.
Nah.
No.
Sure, yes, but you've definitely read my notes.
No, I haven't.
Oh my God.
Multimedia.
Media, 67% currently employed in media, according to this survey, indicated that they wish to resign, which was the was the highest industry.
Wow.
Mate, I'll tell you what, if you could multi this up for me and tell me what number 2 was, we might be on.
Okay, I'm feeling something a bit more technical. I'm feeling maybe something analytical. Lawyer, accountant, engineer. I'm umming and ahhing between those 3. I'm going to settle on engineer.
Oh, look, this one is a bit of a curveball. It's people that work with or in fast-moving consumer goods.
What is that?
So, like
not even a real job.
Packaging up food, and I'd imagine they have been pretty busy lately with the amount of supply chain pressure on supermarkets, and that was followed by healthcare and financial services. So you can kind of see industries that would have been very busy and quite stressful over the pandemic. But no, look, quite a good report there from our girl Schlingers. And I'll just round out that report by saying one of the points that they left on was that 67% of people surveyed would prefer to either take a pay cut or forego a promotion or pay rise in order to have a better work-life balance. So, rather than earning more money, they might prefer to work from home a couple of days or, have more time with the family, which is interesting and leads me to our next segment of inflation. They might need that pay rise sooner rather than later if we're going off a little bit of this.
I tell you what, between inflation and the election has to have been 80 to 90% of the news headlines over the past week. I settled in on a rare occasion on Monday night to watch the Channel 7 news, and it was like 20 minutes before they got past anything related to election, interest rates and inflation. It was just everywhere.
Just a side note, I got your birthday invite. And only you could have it on election night and be excited about it.
Correct.
He's booked out a table with the specific requirement that the TV shows the election for May 21st, and we'll be all perched under having a few.
And any of my friends who are listening who've got the invite, don't worry. I've asked for a balanced view. I've asked for ABC and Sky News. I've asked for a view of ABC, Sky News, Channel 9, Channel 7, a balanced view of the election count.
I've heard it all.
Hey, if that does exist. I'm going to throw to you because inflation, we want to talk about it, but one segment that we love, and we've given you the obligation and the privilege of dealing with what has fast become the most popular segment of this podcast.
Stat fact.
The Stat Man.
Stat fact.
It's me every time, that stinger. that stinger's good by you, Nico.
So, producer Nick, smiling ear to ear. What do you got for us this week, Mitch?
So
as a stat fact, fun fact.
Well, I've gone the fun option. I know that's you guys are still trying to figure out the distinction between a stat fact and a fun fact. And when I say you guys, I more mean my man James. But this week's very topical, in line with inflation. And it's in the context that inflation is in fact hitting our classic Australian burger.
Hungry Jacks have leveled up.
We're looking at 2 of Australia's capital city markets, being Melbourne and Sydney. And if we look at Melbourne, this is what inflation has done to the classic burger. Now, bread up 2.7%, eggs up 1.2%, cheese up 2.9%, beef up 11%, and wait for it, vegetables up 13.1%. Like you need an excuse to get rid of them. Now, compared to Sydney, where bread's up 2.2%, egg up 1.2%, beef 12%, pretty similar.
Very similar.
Look, all in all, you're paying about 10% more for your Aussie burger than you were this time last year. And
and inflation is 5% today. We're going to get to that in a moment.
Yes.
But basically the cheese, the bacon, the eggs and the bread is going up at a slower rate than inflation. So you're saving money on those parts of the burger. It's the beef and the vegetables that are driving it up.
The beef and veggies hit you. And then if you want a beer with the burger, which is the perfect option, in Sydney, you'll be paying about 2.8% more for your beer than you were this time last year. And in Melbourne, only 0.7% more. So I think if you are
Melbourne, what are they sitting on a stockpile pile of beers?
I think it might be that down in Sydney they probably prefer some of that crafty nonsense, whereas in Melbourne it's just your VB Carlton draft number. So it could be a little distorted based on the actual, price of the craft beer compared to the manufactured big ones. So anyway, that was your fun fact. Hopefully I've done it justice there for you, Schlingers.
Very good. I'm sure she'll be very happy, and you've done a better job than me. Let's talk about inflation because it has been everywhere. For those who aren't aware, first of all, inflation is the increase in the price of goods and services. So anything that we buy, whether it's groceries, whether it's petrol, whether it's even a service like, going to our accountant, our bookkeeper, the local car wash, whatever you might buy with your money, inflation measures the cost of those items as against the same cost 12 months ago. The cost is up 5.1% across the board compared to this time last year. It's the highest rate of increase since 2006. And it has been headlined by a very similar trend to the one that you've just pointed out with the burger there.
Yep.
Leading the pack, construction up, or in fact, I should say, not quite leading the pack, just behind transport. Construction up 13.5%. Construction up about 10% as well. It sort of drops off from there. They call it housing. Furniture and equipment up another 6.7%. So we've got basically furniture, the cost of building a house, and fuel and transport that are above the 5%. Everything else roughly up by 3 or 4%.
Yeah, so I think they talk a lot about underlying inflation as well in their modelling, particularly when it's influencing monetary policy. But if you take out those top three being transport, housing, and furnishing and equipment, they're typically saying that inflation sits around, or underlying inflation sits around 3.9% or 3.7%, I should say, which is not as high as 5.1%, but still puts it ahead of the RBA's 2 to 3%, target of inflation.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, what it basically means is, and why they prefer underlying inflation is because it removes a number of the anomalies. So the Reserve Bank prefer it because it's a more sort of guide on what's actually happening, what's being driven by consumers wanting to spend more money. Whereas things like petrol, we've got a war in Ukraine, which is impacting the cost of petrol.
Yep.
That's a bit of an anomaly. We've got floods that have impacted the costs of construction materials. We've got parts of Asia, namely China, who are still in the midst of the pandemic. Beijing's still doing lockdowns, Australia's fast becoming a little bit ahead of the rest of the world. We get a lot of our furniture from overseas, a lot of our timber from parts of Asia as well. So you can imagine the cost of fuel, timber, furniture, all those sorts of things, they're high because of supply-based challenges rather than the consumers like you, me and our listeners having more money to throw at these things.
Right. So like a large portion of this inflation is driven by supply challenges rather than demand from consumers in summary.
In other words, we've got a war in Europe, we've got a pandemic, and we've got some once-in-100-year floods happening.
Not a great run.
No, not a great run.
Not a great run. Now, also, I just need to make a note because I know this is broadcasted over a podcast and the listeners may not be able to see, but James just mentioned fuel 3 or 4 times, and you should have seen the grin on his face talking about the fuel prices increasing driving around in his Tesla.
Can't fill it more than the tank will take.
But speaking of fuel, fastest pace of increase in fuel price since Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990.
Ooh, bit of a concern.
Hurts.
I want to, though, finish on one thing before we maybe get into my pop quiz for you, and that is a bit of perspective, Mitch, a bit of perspective, because I want to talk about our inflation rate versus other countries. We're at 5.1%. The US is at 8.5%. Europe, 7.4%, the EU, 7% for New Zealand and the UK. So Australia at 5.1%, still actually quite low compared to other countries, which to me says that we're actually doing pretty good compared to a lot of those countries that are probably more heavily impacted by some of those anomalies that we mentioned a moment ago.
Yeah.
One last thing to round out on this one, Mitch. we're recording today, Tuesday morning. The Reserve Bank of Australia is set to meet today after we record. A lot of speculation that they're going to increase the interest rates, or certainly that was the probably got 5 minutes airtime last night on the Channel 7 news.
Yeah.
What are we thinking around interest rates and inflation?
It's it's one of the most talked about topics at the moment. Sportsbet even have a market on it, whether they will increase or not. Yeah, overs and unders. About $1.90 saying they will, and you'll get about $2.10 saying they won't. Look, it's pretty even there. I think a couple of things to consider. I know the RBA's job is not to consider the political impact of any of their decisions. It's purely based on monetary policy. But obviously there's an election in May. That's got to at least run across their brain at some point. And then also the wage growth numbers are influential to what they do with rates, and those results or the data won't be released until I think about the 16th of May, the March numbers.
Yeah.
So I'm leaning towards they won't, on the basis that there's an election, even though they're not meant to consider that.
Jeez, careful there, Mitch. This could age very poorly for you.
But most importantly, because the wage numbers haven't come out, I think they'll need to see, strong wage increase before we see a rate increase.
And look, they've got to increase at some point. The Reserve Bank cash rate, as we record, is 0.1%. The 10-year average is 1.6%. The 20-year average, 3.3%. And the 30-year average, 4%. So we're so far under the 10, 20 and 30-year averages. They're going to go up by 1% or 2 at some point. They have to, because they can't stay this low, this record low rate forever. I'm going to we'll deal with that next week in a bit more detail on the pod. I'm going to give you my pop quiz here.
Oh,
and
I've
hidden. So we've got a shared document for those listening. We've got a shared Google Doc. I didn't put this in the shared Google Doc because I have been doing so. When I've quizzed Alex, they've already been in the notes, but she doesn't tend to read them. So I know you do though. So I've kept this one out. Elon Musk, we talked about him last week. He's buying Twitter at the moment for some $60 billion. I'm going to ask you, what do you think Elon Musk's net worth is today? I'm going to start with this one. What do you think it is today, his net worth?
So his personal net worth or
personal net worth.
And that's okay. Personal net worth for Big Elon, just quietly, his Twitter behaviour lately has been so entertaining.
Yeah. He's talking about buying McDonald's now and fixing the frozen ice cream
He's fixing
machine.
the soft serve machine. He's putting a certain something back in Coca-Cola, which Jordan Belford has put his hand up to run. But anyway, I digress. His net worth, I reckon it'd be in the vicinity of $120 billion, personally.
250.
250?
Yes.
250 billion US.
I'm ready to spend irresponsibly.
Well, some would argue that is what Elon is doing at the moment.
Yeah.
So you can understand he's worth $250 billion. So throwing $60 billion at a social media company, whilst it is significant, it's not the end of the world for him. I want to go back all the way to 2002. Elon Musk sold his share in PayPal in 2002. So that's how he started out. He was a shareholder in PayPal. I believe PayPal sold to eBay. Sold it in 2002. What do you think his net worth was in 2002 as a result of that?
2002 prior to the sale of PayPal or afterwards?
Afterwards, yeah.
Afterwards, I'm going to say 80 million.
That's closer. That's closer than your last step at 100 million.
Ooh.
Then in 2012, he put majority of that money into Tesla and then SpaceX, which is a company that he's got that sells rockets, and then a solar company called, I think it's called Solar Systems. They do a lot of the solar technology. So in 2012, he was in all those companies. They were starting to grow. What do you think 10 years ago his net worth was? If it was 100 million in 2002, if it's 250 billion in 2022, what do you think it was 10 years ago?
10 years ago. I reckon in the last 10 years it would have accelerated the most, given the entry of Tesla and SpaceX and all that type of thing. I reckon you're probably looking around just shy of $1 billion 10 years ago, and he's gone kaboom.
2 billion.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Not far, well, $1 billion off.
And then bonus points here. I don't have like a prize or anything, but I'll buy you coffee tomorrow if you can get this one, because I'll be very, very surprised if you do. 2020, as the pandemic hit in April 2020, what do you think Elon Musk's net worth was in 2020 April?
This is completely throwing a dart at a wall blindfolded, but I'm going to go 20 billion.
Oh, pretty good. 25.
Oh,
So he's
wow.
gone from 25 billion in 2020 to 250 billion in 2022.
That's phenomenal.
Such has been the growth of his three respective companies.
Wow.
I think he's got a bit of money put into Bitcoin and a few other things as well. But Elon Musk has done very, very well out of the pandemic, hence why he can afford to throw some $60 billion around today.
Elon, if you're listening, I just want a Land Cruiser Sahara. Be about 130 grand. Nothing.
Have you adjusted for inflation, mate?
No, just quiet. I'm never getting a Land Cruiser.
Hey, let's talk house prices. That data came out yesterday.
Hot off the press.
Give us the sort of the high level summary, so to speak, on what is happening out there at the moment.
Yeah,
We read CoreLogic reports so you don't have to.
Nice. Look, pretty consistent with April's numbers. With March's numbers, I should say. Sydney house price down 0.1%. Still up for the year though at 0.5%. And the median house price in Sydney is still 1.4 thereabouts. So, not much change, negligent if that. If you look at the dollars there, 7,085 is the dollar value of increase in Sydney year to date. So pretty minimal.
But not going backwards.
Not going backwards, no. So, despite the headlines you read about, this doomsday and everything coming, it's, quite marginal. Melbourne, similar, 0.2% down for the month. No movement year to date. So there's been nil there, and median house price in Melbourne about $1 million. So still up there. Brisbane though still growing, 1.7% growth for the month. So I think it was 2.1% last month if I recall correctly. It was certainly around that. So eased but still growing, 8.5% up for the year. So that'd be about $74,000 of growth in Brisbane's median house price this year. Median house price is at $880, so quite high there. Adelaide, similar trend, up 1.9%. So over, I think last month.
Fastest growing for the whole month.
Fastest growing, which I think Brisbane was
Adelaide.
last month. So in April, Adelaide's taken the cake there, up 8% for the year. So similar, and about $54,000 of growth year to date. Median house price sitting at $676,000. Perth up, Canberra up. They're all sort of, chubbing along at that sort of 3%, 3 to 4% thereabouts. So look, all in all, I think, house prices remain, relatively healthy. The market still suggests that there are capital city markets growing, like Brisbane and Adelaide in particular. I certainly think we'll see Sydney, the upper quartile of the market ease, and that's probably what's contributing to the minor reduction in value so far. But, all in all, nothing to be worried about. Still pretty healthy numbers.
You wouldn't know that has been the trend. Like the Australian median house price is up for the month of April. You wouldn't think that reading some of the headlines that are getting traction at the moment.
Nationally up 2.4% for the year. Yet every headline you read is interest rates rising, mortgage stress imminent and all of this stuff. But, that same thing could be said about the predictions prior to COVID and all that. Take it with a grain of salt.
And every market in Australia up for the year to date.
Correct.
And 4 out of 6, the 6 main capital cities up for the month of April. So it can be misleading what you read.
Absolutely. But as you see interest rates rise, often is the case with rents. But interest rates haven't been rising, and rents, James, still continue to grow quite rapidly.
Rents is the real surprise. Every capital city has seen their rents increase by more than 6% in the last 12 months, as much as 12% in Brisbane, 10% in Sydney and Adelaide, and Canberra for that matter. So look, every market up by 6 to 12%. And we talk about inflation. Inflation's 5%. Across Australia, rents are up by 9% for the year. So we're seeing rents increasing at a rate of 4% above inflation. If you are a property investor at the moment, that is your biggest lever when it comes to, looking after, what's going on with your personal finances, because interest rates, you can't control when they go up. They're going to go up at some point. What you can control is how much rent you get to come in and offset that increase in cost.
Well, if you look at Brisbane, as you said, up 12%, we're paying $400 a week, last year or thereabouts. You're probably paying about $450 this year, or $448. So you can imagine that extra $50 is probably going to be more than what your additional interest rates repayment would be. And as an investor, that's going to be tax deductible as well. Obviously, that's a moving target, but
in the past 24 months, rents are up 14%.
Yeah,
which is huge.
That's crazy. Tough to find a rental property out there as well, which would be contributing to that pressure on price.
Well, and a couple of weeks ago, you would have heard Alex was talking about her rents going up. Whoops, I've touched.
That's what I do over in that seat.
Yeah, sorry, mate. I'm playing with the height of this table. Just thought I'd get you back.
Yeah.
Hey, Alex was talking about her rents going up, and a lot of people at the moment, they're landlords and their rents are going up. And obviously, it's a tough time for tenants. But as the landlord, you've got to think about the fact that your rents, you're going to have that rent for 12 months. And in the next 12 months, your interest rates could increase by 1%, maybe even more than 1%. So you've got to factor that in. Obviously, a lot of people at the moment saying, I feel like it's a little bit unfair for me to pass on such a big rent increase to the tenant in one go. But I think you've got to take that perspective that you are going to be stuck with that rent for 12 months and interest rates are going up. So, you really need to obviously stay within market value, but I think you've got to take the opportunity to put the rents up by as much as you're able to, given that your rent's going to be locked in and your costs are going to go up.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And listings was the other one, mate. Listings was one, before we do move on, which was something that really caught my eye. Listings for the past couple of years have been running 25 to 30% below the 5-year average all across Australia. So in other words, there's just not been any properties for sale. There's been about 25 to 30% less properties for sale than at any point over the past 5 years. We're starting to see a bit of a change in that respect in Sydney and Melbourne, but not so much in Brisbane and Adelaide, aren't we?
No, Brisbane and Adelaide still 20% below. So there's still, the inventory is more than 20% below levels from a year ago in Brisbane and Adelaide. And that's, and see that by the growth that we just touched on in the Logic report.
And 40% below the 5-year average. So 20% below a year ago, which was low, 40% below the 5-year average.
Yeah. And in Sydney, they're pretty much in line at the moment with their 5-year average. And then listings in Melbourne are about 8.2% higher than their 5-year average. So as you were saying, starting to see some changes there. But yeah, look, each capital city market has its own trends there.
And one last thing to wrap up on is green loans. Now, CBA have announced this week that they're going to create what they call a green loan product. Now, a green loan is basically if you can demonstrate that you've got a 7-star green rating on your home. So you build, the windows in a certain way. You allow a certain amount of light to get in, which reduces your electricity output, particularly if you've got solar, that's a way to accelerate it. What they're going to do is they're going to offer you a cheaper interest rate, all about them becoming, environmentally responsible. It isn't a new product, but it is new for CBA. So there's already some products out there with the likes of First Mac, who I think you've got your loan with. They've got a product where basically if you've got the 7-star rating, you get a 1% discount on your interest rate compared to the current variable rate. So if the variable rate's 2.8, you're paying 1.8%. It is a huge opportunity for homeowners, not just investors, but probably more so people with their own homes to try and build some of this stuff in or even look at a renovation to get them up to the 7-star rating.
And that's going to be the thing to consider, like how much is it going to cost to get your home to the required, energy rating or green energy rating? And that's weigh it up. And if it's worth it, there's every chance that you should, go ahead with it and cop the 1% deduction.
And I think too, we've noticed like on brand new homes, let's say the home's 300,000. I think we've been working out it's different depending on the home and like the orientation of the block and where it is can have an impact because it's got a lot to do with how you deal with light, and the temperature in the home. Without getting into the boring technical stuff, the reality is on average it's about 15 grand I think on a $300,000 home. So what's that, a 5% cost increase, which you can depreciate over time, and if it's offering you a 1% saving, let's say you borrowed 500,000, what's 1% on 500,000?
Yeah, so you make it back in a year effectively.
1%?
$5 grand.
$5,000. So yeah, it's 15 grand over.
Oh, sorry, you make it back in 3 years.
3 years. Yeah. Without
So,
the depreciation.
Third year loan term, obviously it's going to be changing depending on, if you fix it or variable. But certainly if you've got the capacity to do it, sounds like it's a good idea and good for the environment.
Good for the environment. Yeah, absolutely. So Bank of Australia, loans.com.au, First Mac, and now CBA, you watch. Now CBA's done it. Every bank will have a green loan product.
Yeah, 100%.
Hey, Mitch, it has been a pleasure to have you on here.
Pleasure is all mine, James.
And how many days in are you now to the month off the grog? You mentioned the cost of inflation on a beer just before. You haven't been having a beer
off the record. I haven't. I tried my first alcohol-free beer, I should say, and not a fan.
No.
Not a fan. I'd rather just have a soda water. But no, I think I'm, I don't know how many days, but I started 17th of April. So what's that?
Okay.
2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. Feels like a lifetime.
Oh, right. And you're going a month, are you?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Oh, how good. Mate, I'll be getting you coming in hot for my birthday on the 21st.
Yeah.
Essendon play Richmond that night too. So you and Knackers.
I've stopped watching football for the season.
Mate, me too. I still haven't recovered from having to watch my Saints on the weekend. That was a terrible game.
At least, you're featuring in the top 8 there. Yeah. I've got to load
Mate,
more.
We're in the top 4.
I've got to press load more on the ladder to see my guys. Thank you very much for having me, James, and see you next time if I do, in fact, get the tap on the shoulder.
I'm sure you will. Hey, thanks everyone for listening. If you do love the podcast, please give us a rating. Recommend us to your friends. We love and know that you do. Quick shots, keep an ear out for that in the next couple of days as well. If you've got questions, send them in. Thanks again, Mitch, for joining us today. Might have Alex back or you might have to fill in next week. Who knows?
Available. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Double Shot with your favourite cousins, Alex and James Fitzgerald. If you've got a burning question or something we absolutely need to talk about on the pod, please write to us. Both of our emails are in the show notes. For little real estate tidbits and a little bit of banter, a lot of banter, you can follow us on the gram. Our handle is thedoubleshot.podcast. That, my friends, is thedoubleshot.podcast. Until next time, think of us when you sit back and sip your next double shot.